Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ottumwa City Council's work session. And just for transparency, I just want to remind everybody this is a work session, so there'll be no decisions made tonight. It's for information purposes and discussion. The council won't be taking any official actions on anything tonight since it is a work session. So if everybody would rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First, we'll go ahead and take the roll.
Councilmember Bussey. Here. Councilmember Galloway. Here. Councilmember Hoffman.
Here.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Here.
Mayor Jones.
Here. The next item is we need to approve tonight's agenda for our work session. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Cavanagh.
Yes.
Councilmember Bussey.
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway.
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is we're gonna have a presentation by Ehlers and Cooney. And Phil, do you want to say anything before they start off?
No, Christine Stone has been the city's primary attorney from Ehlers and Cooney. And Logan Brundage has also supported and been on the last couple of meetings. And I understand there may be a little bit of transition, and I'll let you guys talk about that. Ehlers and Cooney has been serving the city for the last 3 years, I think now.
Since 2020,
Yeah. And we've had a lot of good success. I think between staff and the firm and council, we've been able to get a lot of things done, whether it's increasing some of the 657As or just general agreements and ordinance changes, etc. So it's been a good relationship. Christina reached out about this time of the year, especially with new council members coming on, talking about some of the general overview and expectations for council members and how that relates to the city. And so I'll turn it over to Christine.
yeah, thank you. So, one of the big reasons Logan and I wanted to come is because oftentimes we're just the voice on the phone, so we wanted to show you who we are. We have been serving as city attorney since 2020. We've really enjoyed it. There are other people at the firm who also work with the city and the staff. But we thought this would be a good chance to just kind of touch base with all of you and talk about the role of a council member and then generally some open meetings and open records things. We know you have a work session, we know you're doing budget discussions, so we will do our best to keep things moving along. If something comes up and you have questions, feel free to interrupt us, or always feel free to reach out afterwards too if there's something that you want to visit about. We're happy to do that. But I'm going to turn it over to Logan and let him start things off.
Thanks, Christine. Good evening, everyone. Just to kind of give you an overview here, like Christine said, we'll try to keep it moving, maybe 30 to 45 minute discussion here. Broken the presentation out into 4 topics there, kicking things off with just big picture, city government, kind of basics for folks' benefit, and then some best practices, and then I'll turn it back over to Christine for open meetings and open records. The council members specifically are kind of the intended audience here, as you guys roll on and begin your terms for some of you, just kind of giving you the primer to kick things off from the city legal perspective. So big picture, Iowa has different types of city governments, different structures and forms available under the Iowa Code. Ottumwa operates under the mayor-council form of government, which maybe was obvious to you all as you have a mayor and council. The mayor is the chief executive of the city and the presiding officer. However, the mayor does not vote in matters before the council. Instead, the power of the city is vested solely in the city council, except as otherwise provided by state law. The statutes, importantly, do not vest any power in individual council members. We're going to talk about acting as a body momentarily here, but As an elected official, you hold the seat, and all 5 seats act as a unit. So, and there are exceptions for the mayor. They may have specific powers under Iowa law or city ordinance as the executive officer. However, city council members individually do not. Iowa Code Section 372.4, sub 1, sub A, allows the council to provide for a city administrator and prescribe the administrator's powers and duties. The city has done that by ordinance, which is allowed, and obviously Mr. Rath is the city's administrator. And there's the specific code section within Ottumwa's city code that sets out the duties and authorities of the city administrator, including recommending measures necessary or expedient for the good of the government and the welfare of the city, coordinating and supervising the officers and department heads of the city, and keeping the council fully advised, and preparing and submitting to the council the budget requirements, which is what you're in attendance here tonight to discuss and work on in preparation for the coming year, as well as some other various duties. And as discussed, your authority and powers come from actions taken as part of the city council, not your action as an individual. The council is responsible for establishing policies and direction for the city. The implementation of those policies is then left to the city administrator. So as you sit on the dais and you make decisions as a council, it sort of is big picture governance, and then the details sort of trickle down, for lack of a better phrase, into the administrative roles and employees of the city. And this framework comes from both state law and local law. We're really driving this point home. Individual council members do not have the authority individually to implement policy changes by going directly to city department heads or staff members, more specifically. And in doing so, going to the police chief, going to the fire chief, public works director, community development director in one-off conversations and giving direction, it creates confusion through potential mixed messages, kind of bypasses a chain of command that should exist. It can also create liability for the city or you individually as a city council member in doing so. Individual council members do not have authority to bind the city, either in one-off agreements with private parties or potentially through that direction to city officials or officers. So if an officer acts in bad faith or knowingly exceeds their authority, they may be held personally liable for damages as a result of any consequential actions or events that occur from those decisions to attempt to bind the city. So it was a run through a big picture, just authority, global structure.
And we're not trying to scare anybody. I mean, under Iowa law, the city does have an obligation to defend and indemnify council members for the actions that you take in your role as council members on behalf of the city. The point of this discussion tonight is just to let you know that, part of your role is acting as a body. So when you go out there and start doing things on your own without the authority to do them, that's when you could potentially find yourself out on an island, and then the city wouldn't have an obligation to indemnify and defend you. So we just wanted to, kind of outline that delineation of, you are part of a body. What you do at city council meetings, you're entitled to express your opinions, you're entitled to disagree with council members, but you're not, able to go out and sign contracts on behalf of the city by yourself or negotiate with people by yourself. That would be sort of outside the scope of what you're expected to do.
And then some best practices here for attempting and hopefully succeeding as working as a body and making decisions on behalf of the city. So again, you're acting together to achieve common objectives for what is likely the betterment and success of the city of Ottumwa. So to do that, it's recommended to kind of identify a shared direction and set of goals for the city, either quarterly, annually, on a budget cycle, in specific departments, to move objectives forward for the city, and provide policy direction for the city administrator and staff to carry out. With that direction, it would then be their role to implement the policies through the city's employees. Annual budget meetings or work sessions, kind of like this one, are a good opportunity to identify some of the priorities for the city's policies and directions to take. And then once you have those objectives and goals set, it's kind of recommended to work over the next year to focus on those priorities identified either through budget setting or other work session settings, and dig into those policies and objectives going forward throughout the next 12 months or longer, depending on the project. If you have kind of this structure that you have identified goals and objectives, and then everybody's rowing in the same direction to achieve those, it helps produce tangible results that hopefully you're all aiming to undertake and achieve. And it can be easy to get off track sometimes, but if you kind of trust in this process, you have some things, a starting point and an end point, oftentimes, where you can point to for real results. And then again, it's sort of a trust the experts type of thing. City administrator and department heads are on the ground and sort of the experts in their fields, and they can help to implement the priorities and give recommendations or suggestions along the way. They have a lot to bring to the table as the city's tenured staff, and you can lean on them to achieve the objectives and goals that you might have. And then if you have specific concerns, sort of respecting that chain of command, it's recommended to take them directly to Phil as city administrator, and again, not to the department heads or staff members directly, just to avoid confusion and keep things in line that way, and clean delivery of communications as well. Individually, you're one of 5 members making up the council, so. And as Christine mentioned, each one of you is obviously an elected official, elected to represent the interests of your constituents. You're entitled to your own opinion, and the First Amendment and good government affords you the opportunity to express that opinion in work sessions and the dais and public hearings and things like that. Disagreements are normal, inevitable, and actually can be very productive if navigated constructively, which is kind of a subjective term, navigating disagreements constructively. So it's sort of up to you all to determine what that navigation looks like, what is constructive disagreement whenever that should arise. So any questions on some of these high-level best practices? All right.
So I'm going to jump into kind of an overview of the open meetings and open records law in Iowa. So as city council members, you are subject to the open meetings law and the open records law for your actions taken on behalf of the city. The open meetings chapter is found in Iowa Code Chapter 21. Open records is Iowa Code Chapter 22. Both have similar kind of policy statements in the beginning of the chapters. Chapter 21, here it says that it's intended to assure through a requirement of open meetings of governmental bodies that the basis and rationale of governmental decisions, as well as those decisions themselves, are easily accessible to the people. So the whole idea is that the citizens get to know why you're doing what you're doing. And so that is the intent of the law, and that should always be kept in mind. Any ambiguity in the construction or application of the chapter is to be resolved in favor of openness. So if you're not sure whether you should be having a conversation outside of a meeting, always err on the side of, hey, why don't we wait for our next council meeting and we can discuss this at that. I can have Chris place it on the agenda, and we can all be on the same page. So always err on the side of more open versus less open. Again, the law is to be liberally construed. Its purpose is to prohibit secret meetings and to require such meetings to be open and to allow the public to be present. So the public doesn't always get to have a say, but they get to hear what it is that you folks are doing. That's really what the law requires.
And I just wanna confirm, I just wanna confirm that even if it is information only, we are still subject to open meetings, and if it's something that could be, had a decision made later, we still cannot meet if it hasn't been published or doesn't follow open meetings, correct?
With a quorum of the
With every
council?
single person.
Right, yes, if it's a quorum of the council, and if it's information that is part of your policy-making duties, it's better to do it at an open meeting. Post an agenda, identify the item, have an open meeting on it. There are some situations where I would say if it's less than a quorum of a council and it's informational only and you're receiving information from staff, in some of those very limited circumstances, maybe it's okay to have small meetings where it's not everybody and you're just receiving information. But if it's ever like, what do you think about this? How would you vote on this? Absolutely anything like that needs to occur at an open meeting. Because there is case law that says there can be sort of serial meetings that could become a violation of the open meeting law. So if Phil's calling each of you individually and saying, hey, how are you gonna vote on this? Well, this is how so-and-so is gonna vote on this. That could be formulating a, consensus on an item. That could be a violation of the open meetings law, so, yeah. So under the open meeting statute, the two questions are, is it a governmental body and is it a meeting? So the code defines what those are. A governmental body is defined as a board, council, commission, or other governing body of a political subdivision, which you are, the city council. It can also be advisory boards, advisory commissions, advisory committees, task forces, things like that are created by an executive order of a political subdivision of the state to develop and make recommendations on public policy issues. So that is somewhat of a vague definition. If it's a formal committee that's sort of created by city code, I generally say they should be treated as an open meeting. If it's an ad hoc committee that's, just short term and has no authority to do anything, and they're just, doing some boots on the ground type thing, and will bring a recommendation to the city council, maybe not, but it's a blurry line, so you always want to be cautious whenever there's committee meetings, depending on who's involved in the committee, how is it set up, and what are you doing. Even if it's not the full city council, it could potentially be subject to the open meetings law, so just be very, cognizant of that, and you can always reach out and ask us to kind of analyze it if you ever have questions. So that's what is a governmental body. Then the next question is, what is a meeting? A meeting is a gathering in person or by electronic means, formal or informal, of a majority of the members of the governing body where there is deliberation or action upon any matter within the scope of your policy-making duties. So an email chain can be an open meeting. That is an electronic form of meeting. I hate reply all. That's just a bad practice to be in when you receive emails as council members. So that's something to be cognizant of. Meetings, however, do not include a gathering of members of a governmental body for purely ministerial or social purposes when there is no discussion of policy or no intent to avoid the purposes of this chapter. So if you all go to a ribbon cutting, that's not a public meeting subject to the open meetings law. If you go to a retirement party, that's not an open meeting subject to the open meetings law, unless you all meet in the hallway and then start discussing things that are, being considered, then that could be. But if you're just there for a party, that is not an open meeting.
How about probably wouldn't happen, but how about a funeral?
Yeah, that would be not an issue as long as you don't all get together and start, talking about things. So if you're there for the funeral and that's what everybody's there for, that's fine. So if you are a governmental body, if it does meet the requirements of a meeting, then you have to have public notice and you have to have the meeting in open session unless closed session is permitted by law. All actions and discussions have to be performed in open session, and each body has to keep minutes of that meeting. The notice, Chris is responsible for that. She gets the agenda out ahead of your meetings. They have to be posted at least 24 hours in advance. It has to be posted in a manner reasonably calculated to apprise the public. Should be easily accessible to the public. And it also has to be provided to the news media who have requested to receive your notices.
May I ask a question on that?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Provided to the news media if they have requested that information, does that necessarily mean that you have to publish it in a newspaper or just provide the information to them?
Just provide the information to them.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, there is that 24 hours in advance requirement unless for good cause such notice is impossible or impractical. I consider that to be a very high bar, just, oh, we forgot is not a good reason. But if there was like, a major something that happened in Ottumwa and, oh my gosh, we need the council to get together to authorize this, there's been a flood or a fire or something that, really requires immediate action and you can't do the 24-hour notice, I think in that case, you probably have good cause to go ahead and hold a meeting. But that should be done extremely rarely and only in the most, extreme of circumstances. In addition to your regular 24-hour agenda, some actions that you take as a council might have a public hearing requirement, and there might be a longer notice time that's required for the public hearing. So those are just things to be aware of. Published notice is normally not less than 4, not more than 20 days before a public hearing. But for zoning, it's a little bit different. There's some nuance to that, but in most cases, at least 24-hour notice is required before you take action on items. The minutes of your meetings have to show the time, date, place, and members present. They have to show the results of each vote. And they have to include sufficient information to indicate the vote of each member. All votes are required to be made in open session, and voting by secret ballot is prohibited. So how you vote, though, the code doesn't say. Some communities do roll call votes for everything, some do ayes and nays, that's kind of your local preference, but the minutes have to at least show how each person voted. Closed session, so that is where the council is authorized to hold a meeting without the public present. The fallback is always open meetings, but in some limited circumstances, the code does allow you to have a closed session. There are 12 possible reasons listed in Iowa Code Section 21.5. Nothing in the law requires a closed session. You can always choose to remain in open session, although in some cases there may be very good reason why you wouldn't want to do that and why we would not recommend you do that. But that is always an option. Any final action that you take has to occur in open session. And going into closed session requires a higher vote threshold than normal items. It's a 2/3 of all the members of the council or all the members present at the meeting. So if you have less than 2/3 at your meeting, it would be all the members of the meeting. The reason for holding the closed session has to be announced at the open session and entered in your minutes, and you have to specifically cite to the, justification for going into closed session. So if you're going into closed session to discuss, the sale or purchase of real estate, that's what your minutes need to say. And then the closed session is limited to that subject. After you go into closed session, you can't then sort of just start talking about other things that are off topic. You really have to stay within that purpose for which you are going into closed session. When you are in closed session, it has to be recorded and minutes are required to be taken. And then the minutes and the recording have to be retained for at least 1 year. And the purpose for that, is a little bit obvious. If somebody thinks you did something wrong and went into closed session, incorrectly, they can petition the judge to review the record and then make a decision about whether, that was correct or not. Logan and I were talking, he read a case today where a judge did that and found that the school board exceeded the parameters of what they said they were going into closed session for. So there is a record of what you talk about. You should be conscious of why we're in closed session. We need to stay on task and on topic, and really limit our discussion to whatever the purpose is.
Matter of the term record, can that be a written record, or is that required to be a recorded message?
The code requires both. And so typically when, if you're in litigation and a judge is reviewing it, they'll review both.
Okay.
So, Iowa Code Chapter 21 does provide that the public is allowed to use cameras or recording devices at your meetings, so you can't ever tell somebody, stop recording. We don't allow cameras in here. They are entitled to have cameras and recording devices in the meeting. However, you are able to enforce reasonable rules for the conduct of your meetings. So if someone is, out of line or standing up and blocking the view of other people, you can regulate those types of things. But if somebody's just sitting in the front row with their phone recording the whole meeting, they're entitled to do that under Iowa law.
And if we go into closed session, they're not entitled to photograph or do anything in the records to record that?
Right, then it's just the city clerk who's taking care of the record there to maintain confidentiality beyond what is required.
Thank you.
So, public comment, I mentioned this earlier, nothing in Iowa Code Chapter 21 says that the public has to be allowed to speak on every item. If you have public hearings, the public is entitled to speak at a public hearing. But the rest of your meeting, you don't necessarily have to allow public comment, although many communities do, and they feel that that's helpful and, provides transparency and good governance and all those things. But you do not have to do that. So you can limit public comment to the public hearing section of your meeting. You can have, citizen comment at the beginning or the end, and say that public comment has to occur there. You can kind of structure your meetings the way that you think makes the most sense for your community. The code does provide penalties for violations of the open meetings law. Damages can be assessed against everyone who participated in an unlawful meeting unless you can claim a valid defense. Advice of legal counsel is a valid defense. So again, if you're ever concerned, not sure, please reach out to us and we can help kind of analyze that for you and give you guidance, because that can help if then someone does bring a claim later on. Costs and reasonable attorney fees can also be paid if there was an unlawful meeting. Those can be assessed against you individually if you participated in those meetings. However, if there is a valid defense, such as advice of counsel, then the city is on the hook for that, and you are not personally on the hook for that. So,
That information has to come before the event takes place, I assume.
yes,
Contacting the attorney.
yes,
or
that
whatever.
would be preferable, yes. There's some other penalties that can be imposed. Actions taken in violation of the law could be voided. I had a case last year where a community that we represent, somebody was alleging that the city clerk was hired unlawful, that her interview occurred in an unlawful closed session, and one of the remedies they were asking for was that the city clerk lose her job. That the court did not go along with that, but, in extreme circumstances, the actions that are taken can be voided pursuant to the law. If you've had multiple violations, as a city council member, you could be removed from office. And the court can impose an injunction against further violations of the law. So if the court imposed an injunction, and if you were to do it again, then you could be subject to, potentially jail time and fines. You just don't want to go down that road. And ignorance of the law is not a defense. So you are all, as elected officials, expected to have, a limited understanding of the open meetings law and to seek help where you need help. So that is really, what we're here to just provide and be available for. Any further questions? Okay. Then, turning to the next chapter, Iowa Code 22. Again, very similar purpose statement. The purpose of the Open Records Act is to open the doors of government to public scrutiny and to prevent government from secreting its decision-making activities from the public on whose behalf its duty is to act. So, the public is entitled to know why you are doing what you are doing. Public records are defined as all records, documents, tape, or other information stored or preserved in any medium of or belonging to the state, county, city, township, school, yada, yada, yada. So really it is a very broad definition. Public records include emails, they include text messages, they include, your calendar potentially. And if it is a public record under Iowa law, it doesn't matter where it's being stored. So if you're doing things on your private phone or your private email, if it's city business, it's city business, regardless of where it's coming from, where you're keeping it, where it's being stored. So that is just something to keep in mind. So again, this is a decision from the Iowa Public Information Board that sort of hammers that home. If you use a privately owned electronic device, such as cell phone, computer, email accounts, to conduct official government business, then the record is still a public record. So anything you do related to the official city business is a public record. The code specifically says that you cannot prevent the examination or copying of a public record by contracting with a non-governmental body to perform any of its duties or functions. We are not city employees, but we work for the city. We provide legal services to the city. Most of what we do is privileged because it's attorney-client privilege, but not everything. So you can't say, well, it's an Allers record, it's not an Ottumwa record. If we are doing things on behalf of Ottumwa that relates to city business, even records that we might have could be subject to the open records law. Similar with your auditors, accountants, some of your outside professionals, they may be holding records of the city even though they're not city employees. Depending upon what they're doing, is it a city function? But that's also something to keep in mind. Lawful custodian is a term that comes up in chapter 22. The lawful custodian is the governmental body currently in physical possession of the record. So if it's minutes in Chris's office, that's a public record. But it's also the governmental body owning a record when it's in the possession of persons outside of the governmental body. So if Phil ships an abstract to our office to look at, just because it's in our office, it's still a city record. Is it a city record, regardless of where it's stored? Each governmental body is responsible for delegating to particular officials or employees the responsibility for implementing the requirements of the open records law. And under the law, every person has the right to examine and copy a public record and to publish or disseminate a public record or the information contained in a public record. In some states, I know their open records laws are limited to residents of that state. So in Iowa, it's anybody. It doesn't matter if it's an Iowa resident, it doesn't matter if it's a person on the other side of the world who's requesting the record. The identity of the requester is irrelevant and the purpose of the request is irrelevant. If they want to see a public record, under the law, they are entitled to see it.
But there could be a fee, right? I'm getting there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And that's where a lot of the disputes in this area comes from. But requests that come in, they may be verbal, they could be in writing. The code doesn't require that it comes in a specific format. It might come to, the city clerk, it might come to a receptionist at another city department. If a request comes in, there should be a process in place where it gets funneled to the correct person to handle. You can't just ignore it. Under the statute, there is no strict timeline in which to produce records, but if the city were to have an extensive delay, there is case law that says that can be considered a silent refusal. So an unreasonable delay can be a violation of the law. The code does include some language that talks about good faith, reasonable delays, where the government is trying to decide whether it should seek an injunction to protect the record, or if it's trying to determine whether a confidential record should be made available to a person. That is considered a good faith delay and you won't be penalized. But the code does include some language that says ordinarily that should not exceed 20 calendar days or 10 business days. So you do want to be somewhat prompt in reviewing documents and at least getting back to people. There is a plethora of categories of confidential records in Chapter 22. Seems like every year or two the legislature adds a new one. Right now we're up to 70, over 70, I think there's like 74 categories of confidential records. And 22.7 is not all inclusive, so there are some confidentiality provisions that are outside of Chapter 22. Attorney-client privilege is a big one, HIPAA is another one. So there are a lot of things that may be confidential under the law if they are requested. The custodian can always choose to release records that are otherwise confidential under Chapter 22. So if you feel like you want to waive the confidentiality provision or not, not assert that, you certainly can do that.
Is personnel records and staff evaluations considered confidential records?
It is. There is a carve out for certain limited information that the city would have to disclose, like their salary, how long they've worked for the city, some of those things. But in general, yes, personnel records are confidential. Here's some other examples. Attorney work product, peace officers' investigative reports, so police records, a lot of those have confidentiality provisions. Personnel records, library records, under Iowa law, library patrons are entitled to privacy in terms of what it is they check out from the library, and so those are protected.
When you say work product, can you be a little bit more clear what that refers to?
Sure. So if it's if an attorney is preparing documents in order to defend a claim for the city, that would be work product. If it's a demand letter or basically it's things that are prepared by an attorney on behalf of the city related to pending or imminent litigation. The lawful 22.3 says that the custodian may adopt and enforce reasonable rules regarding the examination and copying of the records and the protection of records against damage or disorganization. So you could have policies that say, you know, old archived documents of the city, we're not gonna allow those to leave City Hall, but we will make a copy for you and you can take that with you. So you can have reasonable rules to protect documents. The law says that the custodian has to post information for making such requests in a manner reasonably calculated to apprise the public of that information. So you should have somewhere on the website, in City Hall, some location, information for the public on, you know, if they want to make a public records request, how do they do that? But again, if they don't follow your policy and they request it from somebody who's not who they're supposed to request it from, you still have an obligation to respond to that.
Generally speaking, if someone wants to review a product, is it okay to copy it and let them look at the copy, or do you need to let them look at the original? Which way do you handle things like that?
I would say if it's a document that really shouldn't be handled by someone, if it's really old archives that, you know, could be damaged by having someone look at it, I think it's fair to say we're just gonna make a copy and provide that to you because this document is, you know, potentially gonna be damaged.
But otherwise, if they wanna view the document, as long as they don't take it out of the building,
Yes, you can
they
make
can
that
look at it
available.
and give it back. Okay.
Yes, yes.
It can be viewed under the purview of the record holder.
Yeah, and then I thought I had included the fee section, but I guess I didn't. But so under the, a big part of chapter 22, and like I said, where a lot of disputes come into play is, the code does allow the city to charge a reasonable fee to someone who is requesting documents. The legislature's changed that a year or two ago to now it says if you can provide the document in less than 30 minutes, you have to provide it free. But if it takes the city more than 30 minutes to collect the documents, copy the documents, produce the documents, then you can charge a reasonable fee for that. Some communities have a records policy that says we're gonna charge the actual hourly rate of whoever it is that's, you know, having to do the work, because that's what the city has to pay for, and the person who's requesting the record should have to reimburse the city for that. Other communities say, oh, we're just gonna have a flat fee and it's $30 an hour, and regardless of who does it, that's what we're gonna charge. So, you know, whatever you charge, it needs to be reasonable. It can't exceed the actual cost to the city for producing the documents. You have to provide an estimate to the person in advance. And you are allowed to require them to pay the fee in advance before you actually go to all the work to produce the records. I would say open records requests have increased substantially since I've been practicing law, and I just think that's because we do so much digitally now. People just think, whoa, well, it's easy, you know, I just want every email between Phil and Chris for the last 5 years. The city should be able to produce that, no problem, snap your fingers. You know, they don't realize, no, someone in IT we have to search all of that, we have to review it to make sure there's nothing confidential in there, we have to, you know, maybe have an attorney look at a few of them because we're not sure. It can be a substantial expense to the city to provide the information, and under the law as it stands today, you are entitled to reimbursement for that. I would say the legislature continues to tinker with that section, and that, you know, may continue to be tweaked over time, but that's what it says today.
And the term reasonable fee is pretty ambiguous. Who makes that determination within our city as an example?
So,
And we should probably post whatever that fee is.
yeah, so I would say, yeah. Generally, it's whatever your policy is and whatever, you provide to, you know, so whether it's a flat hourly rate, whether it's the actual expense. Under the law, there is a provision that says a person can challenge the reasonableness of the fee. So if somebody disagrees and thinks, well, that is just crazy and this is not reasonable, they can go to court. They can file a complaint with the Iowa Public Information Board. So they do have some recourse in that arena.
Thank you.
But that was quick and dirty, and we just wanted to get you all thinking about these things. If anyone has questions, we're happy to take those. If anyone wants to reach out individually, we're happy to do that. We have our contact information here, our emails, so feel free to reach out. If there's ever a subject that you all are struggling with and would like us to come and give you some, further information, we're happy to do that. We're really view ourselves as a resource to you folks.
On occasion with a topic, we've gotten a legal review or, a formal document stating a position from our attorneys where the city could act one way or the other.
So when you talk about a reasonable chain of command, I assume that any request that the council might have to seek legal clarification on a topic or something should come through the city administrator onto you. Individual city council members should not be contacting legal counsel directly, or should they?
I would
Or could
say
they?
generally it's proper to funnel that through Phil. I would say it would be appropriate individually, like if you ever have a question about a conflict of interest or ethics, things like that. If it's a sensitive subject that you really want to just kind of run past somebody. I have had conversations like that with council members from other communities, so those kinds of things, okay. Or, if it's something that's very sensitive that, maybe you don't want to run it through the chain of command for good reason, you can reach out to us directly. I will just say, our client is the city. You individually are not our client, so things that you do tell us may not be confidential as between other members of the city. So if you tell us something that, oh gosh, the mayor needs to know this, or Phil needs to know this, some of the conversations you have with us we cannot keep them confidential because the client is the city, and so we always have to look out for the best interests of the city. But conflicts of interest, things like that. Do I need to abstain from this type of an item? You can run those through Phil, or you can reach out to us directly. Thank you all for your time. It's nice to see you all in person.
Thank you.
We will let you get to the rest of your business. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda tonight is going to be the preliminary budget workshop presentation by Jessica Kinser, our interim finance director. So Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. You can probably just leave that up for now. We'll go through a few things. Can I take them off and I'll let you know in advance? So people should be able to do that. Oh, does the clicker work? Does the clicker work?
There's only one way to find out.
There's a power button, I'm hitting it.
Oh, you got the guy right there. Got the tech guy right there. Come on, tech guy. It did work.
I wonder if it was that. Is it like
Shows
that?
how you click it.
I think it's all three. Okay. Yeah, so we're just, I still have in here, we'll just, that'll work. So. That works too. Are we ready? Yes. Okay. So thank you for coming tonight. We have a few different things to get to. This is our first budget workshop, and we will be going through just kind of a few things. There was a lot more information in the packet than I planned to go through tonight, but if you have questions, we certainly want to answer those along the way. So one of the things, because we have some new members here on the council, we wanted to just talk generally about public finance, how this works in the state of Iowa, and what exactly all those numbers on your worksheets mean. And so the state of Iowa has a city chart of accounts, which our fund and accounting structure is based off of. Ottumwa has deviated in a few ways. And we'll talk a little bit about that here. I provided that information in the packet so that you could hopefully kind of follow along with that. But we're going to be talking just generally about different fund categories through our budget workshops and trying to stick kind of with the chart of accounts based on funds. So we have general fund, which there are multiple general funds in Ottumwa, as well as special revenue funds, capital funds, debt service, proprietary enterprise funds, and internal service funds. So tonight we're really focusing on debt service and capital funds. We also have then some of the things you'll notice. We have these activity codes that generally conform with the chart of accounts, but have been set up specifically for kind of account structure purposes in our accounting system. And then when we get to talking about revenues and expenses, this was in your packet, and so I just want to touch briefly on this because this is kind of how everything sets up in the budget form and how we have to take data from the financial system and get it into kind of these categories. And so with revenue, we have these different sources of revenue. And so each of the revenue worksheets that you will see as we start to go through this will have multiple line items of revenue that might roll up into miscellaneous revenues. So it's not like there's just one code for miscellaneous revenue. There's multiple codes that could be miscellaneous revenue. And you can see the definitions there. When we get to talking about expenses and budgeting by function, you can see that we have a few different categories of which Ottumwa has activity in all of those. And so tonight we'll be focusing, like I said, on debt service and capital projects. But I do want to put a caveat out there is just because something is not in a 300 capital fund does not mean it's not considered a capital project. And we have some unique circumstances there where we won't be talking about it tonight. We'll be talking about it in the near future. But you know, there are some little quirks to the system. Can you go back? Yep. So anything that is a 4,000 account number, so that last 4 digits, is going to be a revenue account. Anything that is 6,000 is going to be an expenditure account. And so I kind of put this example up here, and I'm glad that Chris printed this off so you can take it with you. So when we have revenue accounts, there's a 3-digit fund number, 3-digit function number, 4-digit account code. And then when we have expenditure accounts, we have a 3-digit fund number, 1-digit activity code, which is where these come into play to tell you what activity we're really putting things with to match the state forms. And then that 3-digit function number, and then the 4-digit expenditure code. That 3-digit function number is one that I did print out and put in the packet because Ottumwa has a lot of 3-digit function numbers. And so because the financial system can't do project accounting, the way that project accounting has been accomplished has been creating a 3-digit function number for any capital project that's happening. And so as we go through some of these funds tonight, you'll see that Fund 301, the street fund, it has a lot of pages to it. It has a lot of functions to it because each project has been given a 3-digit function code when it comes to different expenses. So please keep that in mind kind of as we go through. This is really high level stuff. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I'm just wondering if there's any questions or anything I can try and answer for you right now before we start getting into the meat of things.
Is there any chance you can minus that down so I can see it on that?
Yeah, we're actually gonna pull up some Excel spreadsheets on this one, and so we'll have the PowerPoint running on one and then Excel sheets on the other so that we can be live editing things.
Just trying to not look like I was again.
Okay, I'll have you go forward to the next one. So we wanted to start out kind of with a big overview of the budget process because even though it is January 23rd, there's been a lot of work going on for quite some time. So it starts off with the departments basically developing their budgets and getting that information in. That has been a very fluid process this year as finance has kind of worked through our own departmental issues and getting things updated and getting things out and being able to get it out to departments in an Excel spreadsheet form to make it very easy for us to get information to you and present it to you in an easy way. The state did not issue the actual budget workbook where we could actually start entering in our evaluations until that first week of January. That is abnormal. Normally we get that sometime in December or November. But it didn't really matter this year because the county gave us valuations and then they said, nope, not the right ones. And I think they gave us valuations again, said, nope, not the right ones. And then they gave us valuations and said, okay, this is fine. And that didn't happen until that first part of January either. So there wasn't a lot that we could really do to look at the big property tax picture until we had that information. So now we are in that portion where really we have up to, I think it's February 27th technically, because that would be the final day to get things for the next council meeting. But we are in the part where it is the presenting it to you and working with you as council members to figure out where are we going to end up at on March 5th and bringing those state forms to you to set a public hearing on the total tax levy and really kind of get that process started. So essentially, once we have issued the agenda for March 5th, we are pretty much hands off on the budget at that point. We should be at a final product where we will publish something and you can't go up. You can only go down from what you publish. And so we are in the heart of getting things done right now, which is why your time is so valuable in these coming weeks to make sure that we get to where we need to be so that we can meet that March 5th deadline. One of the new things this year is this truth in taxation mailing that each county has to do. And so that means each county auditor has to have every taxing entity's proposed tax levies in order to get that mailing out by March 20th. And so the earlier that we can get them information, the happier everyone will be. And so that has been the message put out from the State Department of Management is try and get your maximum tax levies set early so that that information can get out and you're not putting a county in a bad position in terms of meeting their deadline for the 20th of March as well.
That has to go out to every citizen, right?
Yep. So mail will be forthcoming in March, but you will hopefully know what your the city tax levy is before then. You should know. And then the property tax public hearing, the tax levy public hearing would be on April 2nd, which is a regular meeting. And then also on the April 2nd meeting would be a resolution to set a public hearing on the overall budget. So there's kind of two steps that are happening here and happening simultaneously.
I think that one is a special meeting standalone by itself, is it not?
Yes.
We have to have like a separate meeting and then our regular meeting, which we'd set the public hearing
Yes.
for.
Yes. And then ultimately everything should be wrapped up by April 23rd. So that's kind of where we're at in total. You can see we're kind of mid-process here, but truly once we hit that first part of March into February, our work is done. We just have to let these public hearings and things play out before things can come to you for approval and then ultimately submission to the state. Yes.
Early on, you made the comment that when you present this budget, you can come down, but you can't go up. So there isn't any deliberate attempt to set a high budget so that you could again adjust it down if you wanted to. Is that right? I mean, you gotta play the game square, so.
Oh yeah, and we're definitely playing the game square. We're coming to you with the information as we have it right now with our best estimates available. And so that's really where we're at. There are things that will change. There were things that changed, errors that I had made in the packet on Friday that had to be corrected today. So there will always be little things like that. And we'll talk more about those as we get into some of our other funds where we have some bigger assumptions built in. But that's with capital and debt, there's not too many assumptions at this point.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Yep. Okay, so tonight we'll kick off with talking about the 2024 borrowing and the debt service. So first up, we'll be going through basically the proposed bond projects. And we have a spreadsheet that we'll pull up here on this screen, and then we'll keep the PowerPoint active on this screen so that you guys have everything up in front of you and hopefully won't have to do as much page flipping. And then we'll get into kind of talking about the debt service levy that we have proposed, as well as then the total tax levy. It's really hard to talk about one piece of a larger puzzle if you don't know what the larger puzzle looks like. And then we'll get into the capital funds. So, okay.
Do we have that printed too?
No, you don't. I thought it was one of the PDF pages.
I don't.
Yeah,
I have it.
that's why I thought it was part of a larger PDF packet.
This is huge. Yeah. That's okay, I'm gonna write all over, can I write on that? Thank you. I
Yeah,
will probably
and-
not give it back to you, unless you wanna find it.
So we're gonna start off with, 2 requests coming from building and code. I've grouped these by department to make the best use of department head time and any questions you might have, for those department heads. So, most of, just as a heads up too, most of these are looking at 2-year requests for things. That has been kind of the past history in Ottumwa is, seeking a bond every 2 years for projects. So we have done our best guesstimate for those items that extend multiple years. So first up is our demolition program with a request of nearly $900,000. This is a program that has been happening and has previously been funded with bond proceeds in the past. It is coming out of 151, which is not in front of you tonight, but will be in front of you at the next meeting to see where it's at. And I think we're about $400,000 of current year activity and looking for ways to keep that activity afloat. And then also from Zach's department, downtown development grants, $290,000. This is also a project that's been at least in the past fund. We borrowed $300,000 to split amongst a variety of different downtown grant programs to basically help revitalize downtown and keep development happening. So Zach is here for any questions if you have them.
Okay, this one's different than that one, so.
There might be one more on that one, that was an earlier version.
There's 4 of them?
4 of them, okay. So these are the 2 that, speaking with bond counsel, would be eligible for bonding. And we're at the programs we were looking at in that 2-year cycle. So initially, there was a larger group and some of them been paired
Okay, so, and the development grants are the same ones that we normally do, or
Yeah.
they new?
So with the downtown development grants, these are the same programs that have already been approved, facade, white box, roof. This year was the first year that we had the restaurant equipment grant, and so there would be a little more included to continue that program. The downtown paint program and the interest buy down. We have used those programs not just as the only grant partner in projects, but also a lot of times these have been grant match, so they've leveraged additional grant funds from the state. So the North Market facades are an example where we use the downtown development funds. We only invested what those building owners would have been entitled to under this program for their buildings, which was comparatively small, and then got an additional $250,000 from the state. These programs, they are eligible in the downtown district, which is more than the Main Street district. It's a lot of downtown, all the way to at least Marion Street. And then it is also Church Street is eligible for these grants as well. On the demolition program, we looked at what our average cost has been on demolitions over the last 2 years. That's a number that's consistently moved up. And we kind of set a pretty aggressive target for what we're wanting to demolish. When I got here, we had a pretty substantial balance in the demolition program because we had only done maybe 9 or 10 a year. We've kept a pace closer to 20 in the last couple of years, and we're wanting to stick around 2025. The blight's out there to be abated. We have 169 placarded homes right now in our derelict property program.
How many?
169.
169. What did you spend last year? Do you
I
remember?
don't remember the number from last year.
I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, $200,000 to $300,000, but we'll have that on the next agenda.
Oh,
If there's no further questions for Zach, we'll move on to Bridgeview Center.
Are these grants, that are approved, have been granted? I mean, we know we're gonna get the money?
The state ones that we use? No. There's a couple of projects that we're looking at, potentially applying for and using this pool as match for that, but those applications have not been awarded yet. We're looking at a 2-year window, so we're looking at prospective CDBGs, not just this year and next, so.
But as an example, this 290,000 requests,
Yeah.
is that not solid? Is that something that may not happen?
Well, that's up to you. This is the request that we're asking to borrow, in the city CIP.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That 290 with grants could be leveraged to 500,000.
Yes, I was gonna say with the grants, what's the max money? I mean, what
Yeah,
can this money
so-
give us?
So the open CDBG projects we have right now that we leveraged funds out of this program is, and CDBG is 550,000, and then there's an additional 250 downtown housing grant, which was a COVID relief program. So those were just 1 year's allocations that we were able to get and have open right now.
CDBG.
Community Development Block Grants. It's federal money. If we were a large enough city, we would be entitled to a certain amount of CDBG funds that come from the federal government to do certain projects. Because we're not that population, we have to apply and receive that money through Iowa Economic Development Authority.
Isn't it over 50,000? Yeah, it'd be over 50,000.
Yeah, the entitlement communities are Des Moines, Waterloo.
But having programs, active programs, successful programs, that will help in the application process, showing that you're utilizing those funds.
Right, and having the match available. Some of these programs we can't get without at least some amount of local match.
And the return has been pretty significant in some of those CDG programs.
Okay, on to Bridgeview. There are 6 different projects for Bridgeview, and Scott is here. One of the really big ones is 2 new video boards, and the vendor had actually come up with a rendering of what that looks like. So we were able to get that on there so you could see what that would look like for what is being requested. And then roof repairs. Combination oven replacement, some theater improvements that involve some furniture and other things, as well as some exterior waterproofing as well. I wasn't sure if the pictures for the water leaking in places were for the roof repairs or were for the waterproofing. So there's kind of 2 different things there. And then replacing some ramp and stairs near the loading dock that have become hazardous as well. And so Scott is here to talk about any of those requests that are before you tonight.
What's leaking, Scott?
A lot. I mean, just be honest, but it'll be 9 years in March, and we still have not figured out the theater leaks. We have done some work over time, probably not a lot in the last 3 years or so. But it would be great if we could try and figure out those leaks. There's,
That you're talking roof leaks? Or
well,
wall
I think
leaks?
it's roof and or wall. I don't know. We've worked with folks from Public Works and others. It's still gonna just take some work. We've made some fixes and attempts, and we've done some roof work already, but what we've done, I mean, it's helped, but it yet hasn't solved the problem.
So, and then this board, which looks good, that would be in addition to the sign out front too, right? And wasn't it having a little bit of trouble too?
No, that would actually replace the sign out front. The sign out front I believe it's installed within 1 to 18 months after Bridgeview opened, so it's about 15 years old. Average lifespan is 10, maybe pushing 12 years.
So there's not even additional cost to
And
replace
so,
that.
yeah, there's
We
no
just
parts
want to-
available or
Gotcha.
anything like that. The north side is shut off because it was so bad. You couldn't read it, and so we took some parts out of the north side to keep the south side working, and that's what's working now. And that's failing.
The original plan was to have visibility from the highway, so people driving by could see what was going on at the event center. But people are driving so fast, and the sign moves so slowly, you'd have to drive by it 6 times to know what 180 was.
Yes, yeah. Big sign.
Well, the placement of that sign, it would still get, wouldn't it still get you should get overpass there maybe?
Yeah.
Or am I looking at it?
Yeah, no, that is the overpass
Yeah,
right
that's
there
what
on
I'm saying. It
the
was
far
look-
right
okay,
picture.
yeah.
Yeah, the Jefferson Street Bridge.
What are the improvements to the theater?
That's a grant, I'll be honest. I have applied for 3 different grants around the community and I've been rejected all 3 times. It's not a fun sizzle project. It's all behind the scenes stuff, but it's stuff that we've had feedback from conductors, musicians, and others that have used our theater that have all said this would be good equipment as you look at going forward. And in our business, it sounds a little sometimes backwards, but sometimes you have to do the things to make the conductor and the musicians happy, because they're the ones that are actually going back and telling the people that, yeah, we want to book Bridgeview Center, we want to stay at Bridgeview Center. They have more say sometimes than the patron. So when it looks at the booking decisions and how to book the events, those are the people we want to take care of. It's like, it sounds a little weird, but we spend sometimes more time taking care of, Cody Jinks and Nate Bargatze backstage, and the producer and the tour manager, because they're making the decisions on to come back to us down the road. So it would be like chairs. One example specifically is cellist chairs. Okay, cellists, they have to sit for like 90 minutes to 2 hours, forward. And so the chair is designed specifically for cellists, and that's one complaint we get with the type. We're basically using an arena chair for a guest for our musicians. And I know for those that may not be in the musical business, but that's not necessarily appropriate. So, there'd be 12 cellist chairs in there, music stands. We don't have enough music stands for our full symphony, so we borrow from the high school, or sometimes the Southeast Iowa Symphony will bring them in themselves. Some of the basic needs like that.
So mostly like pit and center.
Yes, yeah, basically, yeah, all stuff that'd be like really behind the stage. It'd be on the stage or behind the stage is where all that.
We're not talking about any draperies or anything
No,
like that?
no.
Okay.
No.
Scott, you and I have talked before, the more, when these improvements, like you say, Nate Bargatze or the bigger shows, we've actually built on the quality of our shows, correct? Going up and up and up. So the more stuff we do and the more stuff we keep, we're gonna get those bigger acts at a reasonable cost where people don't have to travel and they'll travel to us.
So I just have a question, before we go through all of these capital improvements too. So this is, I understand this is what we're looking at, like our debt too, but, and I know we're gonna talk about income and stuff too, but so these are the projects that you all have gone through and said, these are the ones we can afford.
I think affordability and setting the tax levy is up to you. We are bringing forward sort of, this is the list of what has been proposed as a departmental need that has come forward. And then when we talk about the tax levy, we will talk more about like how does a bond of the total amount, whatever it ends up being, fit there. But previewing, yes, we are proposing a total tax levy that is less than where we are in the current fiscal year, and that is slightly reduced on the debt service, but there are some debt service things that we do need to talk about still.
Okay, cause I was at a meeting today and Phil and I were talking about like, what is it, 26 cents that's gonna be taken off of, some income and stuff. I think it's important, I just want us to make sure that like, as we're talking about this too, there's probably some things that we're gonna have to say like no to, correct?
From what I can tell you, from what everything has been submitted by departments, has been very much holding the line. Like,
Okay,
I have
just
been
wanted to make sure
very-
we were all on the same page first to say like, are we gonna get through this whole list and then you're gonna tell us we have to cut like $3 million?
No, and then we can pivot, if you wanna pivot to what the debt service tax levy looks like first, in sort of a different order, we can do that right now.
Well, and just real quick, so the conversation that Karen and I had, and I don't know if you had the total thing there, with the combined general fund levy coming through from the House File 718, you had the general fund levy of $8.10, the emergency fund levy of 27 cents, library levy of 27 cents, and the event center levy, operating levy of 13.5 cents. So that was at $8.77.5. Positive, I think we talked about this, we grew, but we grew more than 3%, so we have a 3% penalty on that, which then, as a result, instead of 877.5, we're at 851.6 or whatever it is. So that's at 26 cents off that combined general fund. All that is operating. This capital debt service is separate from that. So in one way, we can still lower the levy and you have a little bit of cushion there to take on some of these projects.
I
that
guess
might-
what I'm just saying is like, do we need to understand the revenue aspect of it first, or the debt levy aspect of it first, before we talk about all these projects? Because,
Yeah,
I mean, you all are the experts of your department, you know what you need. So then if we're like, oh yeah, okay, then we get to the end and you're like, hey, we can't afford all this, now we have to go back. So I guess that's just, I'm wondering if we need to,
yeah, we can do that,
I'm
but I
sorry,
will just
maybe
be
I'm-
very clear and say, you all get to define affordability. From the staff perspective, I take their requests, put them into a form, come up with a total, work with our financial advisor to figure out where it fits in on a form to play the,
yeah, and I understand that too.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, and maybe I'm off for the rest of it, but I feel like, for me, it would be better to understand the other aspect of it before, because
Yeah, and I think that's what Jessica was saying is the requests,
I wanna give you everything that you all want if we can. So.
and I think based off of what was there, I mean, there is a possibility for that. But in the end, it comes down to what you're comfortable. I mean, there's projects on here that say, well, we don't necessarily need that could lower the debt service levy.
And I apologize if you all, for me, I just need to understand this aspect and maybe that.
So just kind of jumping ahead, because everything is programmed in, but it's ultimately your decision what we borrow and what we borrow for. So, but everything is programmed in a way where we can kind of work backwards from that. So this form right here, which is in your packet, and I get that it's very tiny print, that is the long-term debt worksheet that we are required to submit as part of our state budget, which is where we have to list out every bond that we have and the principal and interest due in each year, and whether or not we have another fund paying for things. So we do have some debt where we have the landfill fund, we have the sewer fund,
The urban renewal funds.
yes, some urban renewal and we're putting money towards those bonds so that doesn't total up on the property tax levy. I do want to talk about one very specific bond that is causing some headaches in the finance department, and then that is the 2022 bond, which was an $8 million total bond. There was a $3 million principal payment made on June 1st of 2023, along with some interest, where the city had only asked for a tax levy in 2023 of basically about $900,000 total. So that put us into a deficit position at the end of fiscal year 2023. Looking at what was planned for that payment for 2024, it's a $2.9 million principal payment with some interest on there as well, of course. And a majority of that was going to be covered with a transfer in from local option sales tax. And as we started digging into this a little bit further, we looked at what is local option sales tax approved for by the voters. 90% is for streets and sewers. There were no street and sewer projects in that 2022 bond. So as part of the a process of amending this current year budget, we are not going to be transferring any money in from local option sales tax. So that means that there's more local option sales tax for Philip to work with, but it also means that there is a projected total of about a $3.9 million deficit position that we could be sitting in at the end of this fiscal year, so June 30th of 2024 in the debt service fund. So that is something that we need to work on. That is something, unfortunately, our financial advisor went out of town the day that I was really trying to get this packet together, so I have not had a chance to talk to him for sure about where we're at, but we cannot, I would not recommend, I shouldn't say we cannot. You all can decide that if you want to make up that $4 million at once, or $3.9 million at once, we can certainly do that, but that is going to skyrocket the tax levy. What we have built in here is basically $1.2 million that would go towards that deficit from those FY23 and FY24 payments, so that we'd slowly start recovering while trying to keep the total tax levy in mind, so we're not we're not wildly swinging one way from year to year, basically. The other thing that is built on here, it's line 10 if you have the sheet. We are looking at a pre-levy for 2024, which is why we really need to figure out, what projects are we bonding for sooner rather than later, because to avoid more deficit, we want to ensure that whatever principal and interest we would need for a bond to be paid in fiscal year 25, that we have certified so that we can fully collect on it. And so that is the process that would start with a resolution to set a public hearing on a pre-levy for the 2024 bond at the February 5th meeting, and then public hearing would be held, action could be taken by the council on the February 21st meeting. The second meeting in February.
Yeah, 20.
And so what that would mean is that you are not saying we are 100% borrowing this money at that time. You would only be saying we are giving the authority to levy a tax for the payment of some interest and some principal for whatever amount we will eventually borrow.
What happened where, so like you said, there's a $3.9 million deficit, so was there extra projects that were approved later that wasn't factored into that bond tax levy at the beginning?
I think that from like what we could see, it seems like the ultimate plan was to use local option sales tax, but there was not the purposes that fit the local option sales tax that is available. So 10% of local option sales tax that can be used for property tax relief is going to the general fund. And that is the only portion, that 10% is the only portion that could really be used to make any sort of bond payment on that 2022 bond. So to get to kind of the big picture is we've got some things that have been built in here that give some flexibility if this total tax levy over here is not something that you like. We don't have to request $1.2 million towards that deficit. That number could go down to then impact the total tax levy as well. But that pre-levy number is the one, we've got $254,200 built in there currently. That is the number that our financial advisor really needs to direct us on what that needs to be based on the size of the bond and the duration of the bond, which would not be longer than 10 years, but would certainly not be trying to accomplish making some very large principal payments in a very short amount of time. So as we take this stuff over here and we drop it into the bigger picture, I did a comparison of where we are at this year as well. So we are looking at a debt service levy that is 18 cents less than the current year. And what that translates into on the total levy is a 20 cent difference, where we would be decreasing the tax levy by 20 cents. As I said, you all do have some wiggle room in that, whether it's a decision on how much we borrow and how much that initial pre-levy is set for, as well as how quickly we recover money towards the deficit. But I can tell you the general fund combined levy, the liability, property, and employee benefits, those are pretty solid levies where there's not going to be much wiggle room on those. And so debt service is really the only area where there is the flexibility to make some changes.
Thank you.
So I hope that hasn't confused the larger conversation.
And those numbers are looking at all the projects as presented here. Like Jessica said, there is some room if Tim Oswald comes back and says, now you really should have 400,000 for the pre-levy. You could take 150,000 off of that and stay at that same number, or add it on and increase that a little bit. So there is some wiggle room in the debt service to accomplish what we're talking about.
But if the parameters that we have really set up tonight with a total debt service levy of $4.22 is what everybody is comfortable with, then it truly is just a matter of working with our financial advisor to say, okay, what in your opinion does that pre-levy need to be in moving those numbers around? But at this point, Phil and I are not recommending that we go above the $21 that we have presented there. But if, it is up to you. If you want to push that lower, there are ways that we can do that with the debt service.
Thank you. That helps me understand and be able to look at these like with more clarification.
Do we want to go back to the projects? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of scrolling. No, No, I appreciate the response there. Just to go back and say, are we clear with Zach? Is there anything else for Zach now that we've kind of had that discussion? Okay. Scott with Bridgeview. The one thing I did want to mention was I have a request of $30,000 here, but it actually is $15,000 that we would be borrowing. This is the column where we have the total borrowing summed up at 6.85 million. And so Scott has said that Bridgeview Center would be able to contribute $15,000 towards that project. So it's a $30,000 project, but with $15,000 coming in.
And that's for a 2-year borrowing we're looking at. I think last time it was about 8 million, and prior conversation with Tim, if you remember, he was estimating about $4 million per year is what we could afford. A little bit less because of that deficit we're trying to recover from.
Any more questions for Scott?
Got any free tickets?
Hey.
Sure, you bet.
Can you get Nate Bargatze back one more night?
Christine didn't cover gift law, did she?
I didn't hear that.
$2.99. You can have as much as a cup of coffee and you can only have it
I was telling you there's no value of a comp ticket.
Okay. The next items, the next items are presented by Jean for the cemetery. We have cemetery paving at $50,000, as well as then what I would say is probably the biggest request for this fiscal year, which is a new office and maintenance building with a bond request of 1.875, and then other funds from the Marion Trust coming in to support the remainder of the cost.
Yeah, with the cemetery road paving, we started paving the roads at the cemeteries about 10 years ago. And we have Calvary completely paved. It looks good. It's easy to plow the snow on the brand new asphalt roads. We received a lot of positive comments, and then there's a lot less maintenance for the staff to do. And we started paving roads in the Ottumwa Cemetery about 5 years ago, and we've made a lot of progress, but we still have about a mile to go. So we would like to complete paving of the main roads in the Ottumwa Cemetery to make them more drivable and basically make the cemetery look better for our customers.
What other cemeteries do we have street requirements for?
Just Calvary and Ottumwa Cemetery, because the Jewish cemetery doesn't have any roads. It's a small 2-acre cemetery. Shawl and Memorial Lawn are not ours. They're privately owned.
Okay, that was my question, thank you.
And then with the shop and office building, the cemetery or the city currently owns the house at 1218 North Court that we rent out. And then behind that are our 2 maintenance buildings that the staff works out of. They're in below average condition. When we have heavy rains, the water comes pouring in off Park Avenue into the shop and right on top of the main electrical breaker box for the building, which is a very dangerous and hazardous situation. And then with the office, it's 110 years old. It's not ADA handicap accessible. Sometimes Lauren has to actually go outside and do business on the steps with customers in wheelchairs. The restroom that her and the staff have to use is in the basement, down some very steep, dangerous steps. So we'd like to fix all those problems at the same time and build a new shop and office building in the southeast corner of the Ottumwa Cemetery. And we also have John Hunolt, the chairman here of the cemetery board, and John has a short presentation he'd like to make.
Yeah, thanks for your time here. Just somebody saying, well, some of the concerns that we have, it seems like the cemetery, we appreciate the money for the roads, but it just seemed like we've asked money a number of times in the years, and it seemed like the cemetery pretty much our funding for it is rejected. There's never enough money for us, but to the point of where we really need to work on our building. So thanks for your time here. Let me just sort of read this letter we put together from the board. The Ottumwa Cemetery is in need of a new office and maintenance building. We have requested funding for a new office a maintenance building in the past, but the requests have been denied. In order for us to continue to provide quality service to our customers, we need adequate facilities for our employees to maintain their cemeteries. We need a new office and maintenance building. Our office entrance and bathroom are not handicap accessible. The bathroom is in the basement and it has an outside entrance. We also need more office space. Our office records are stored in the basement, which is damp and not suitable for storing records. Our maintenance building is 50 years old. When it rains, water comes in from the north wall. Water also runs down over an electrical box. The building is not large enough for storing supplies and materials. Last summer, we had several pieces of plywood that were stored outside and were stolen. We need more space to store equipment and our work vehicles. Our plan is to combine the office and maintenance building. Our plan is to build it on the north side of Park Street on the southeast side of the cemetery toward Jefferson Street. The cost is approximately $2 million. We have $150,000 in a building fund now and hope to have another $150,000 from the sale of our old maintenance building and the house at 2018 North Court Street. In 2023, we received a $300,000 donation that was put into our building fund. We recently had to purchase a new backhoe. The cost was $143,610. Requested funds from the city to purchase this equipment, and our request was denied. Since we really need this backhoe, we asked the council if we could take our money from the $300,000 donation to pay for the backhoe, which is approved. We are hoping the city will reimburse us for this purchase. The cemeteries have had to deal with cuts in funding for several years, which has included reduced staff, secretary hours cut in half. We feel it's time for cemeteries to receive some help. We encourage you to tour our cemetery office and maintenance building. Your consideration in this matter is appreciated. Thank you for your time.
And with the shopping office building project, we do have plans and specifications put together, which council requested about a year and a half ago. We'll let Hoffman put the plans and specs together, so from that aspect, we're ready to go on the project. We do think we could probably get $150,000 from the sale of 1218 North Court to reimburse the city after the shop and office building is built.
Where is 1218 North Court? What physical structure is that?
It's a house that we rent out. It's diagonal from the BP station
Okay,
and just to the side of the
Corner of Park and North Court.
and there is a physical building behind that someplace back there.
Yeah. There's a cold storage building and then the main shop and office building that the employees work out of.
Okay, and that's the one that has a problem with moisture getting in from Park Avenue or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, well, do you think that property in itself will bring 175,000? Is that what you said? 150.
Approximately, it could be higher than that if we find the right buyer that, really wants that for a business or something personal where they could live there and have their business right behind their house.
So that's the house and the building behind it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Gene? Okay. Next request, we won't dwell on too much because we've talked about it at the last council meeting. $250,000 for new finance software. The RFP did go out. RFPs as of now are due February 23rd. We haven't received any questions or anything that would result in us pushing that date back. And the plan would still be the March 21st meeting to have something before you in terms of a recommendation and a plan. Happy to answer any questions, and Sarah is also probably happy to provide any testimonial of current software dysfunctionality.
Have you had RFPs come in?
I've had a few different vendors reach out and say that they will be submitting. I think I'm up to 2 or 3 now that have said they'll be submitting.
That's great.
Yeah, so typically, we don't see RFPs back till the way they do for any type of project. Especially something like building costs where they're fluctuating, they'll wait till the last minute to get the best numbers.
Okay, next we'll go on to fire, and there are actually, on the proposed borrowing, there's a little bit of a break here in between things. We had anything that was a fleet item at the very end, but I decided that the department head should be talking about their fleet items that we would need to borrow for as well. And so I'll turn it over to Pat.
All right. The first item was the flooring at the south fire station.
The request was $10,000. Carpet is approximately 20 years old. There's lots of times that we come back from calls, we're bringing different contaminants in. Anything from soot, blood, bugs, viruses. A waterproof floor would make it a whole lot easier to disinfect, a whole lot healthier. Especially with a lot of the flu viruses and the COVID and everything else. It's very hard to completely disinfect that station. The carpet kind of acts like a sponge, collecting things, and over 20 years, it's collected a lot of things.
So would it be your intent to remove the carpeting and put in something else that's more easy to clean?
Yes, sir. It'd be removing the carpet and put in like the waterproof vinyl plank flooring.
Okay,
So it could be sanitized every day.
Yes, absolutely. That's the goal.
okay, thank you.
Is that what you have at the other station?
The other station is more of like a polished concrete.
That plank floor, was that less or more expensive than polished concrete?
That I don't know. That's just how that building was built, the north one. It's the only flooring it's ever had. The south station has been various floors throughout the years.
It's like 50 years old or more, isn't it?
Yes,
Who decided to put carpet in a fire station?
not me. Is there any questions with? No? We want truck 9 or vehicle 313. It's the white and red pickup. This truck is 22 years old. The transmission started giving us some issues. It was actually towed from a response because the transmission started overheating and it's just getting really worn down. The bed bracing is getting all rusted out underneath where that red pump is in back. Our needs have changed considerably since this truck was bought. We had different box vans up there, more box vans. We got rid of 2 box vans, got to 1 bigger truck to haul stuff. So as far as hauling personnel, we need more capability to be able to put more people where a crew cab would come into effect. Also the rescue boat that we switched out, it basically went from a bass boat to a true rescue boat. The rescue boat is basically right around 2,800 pounds. So it's just the transmission, and that truck is just not really made for everything we're using it for. The trailers we're hauling for a lot of our hazmat rescue equipment, once again condensing down to size, are much heavier. So this would be to purchase a crew cab. Instead of a 3/4 ton, it'd be a full tonner. The price of $65,000 actually, when this truck was bought half through the city and half through
That's what
hazmat,
I was gonna ask, is hazmat?
each two.
I know you did.
So, and I actually have a meeting with the hazmat team Thursday. So potentially, it would be half that for the city and half for the hazmat team.
So then if we pay for all of it, then it's not, so it's owned by the city, but hazmat will also be using it?
That would be a question for, I don't have an answer for right now. If the city bought it, then I'm guessing that would potentially want to do something different. I don't know that. That's up to that board.
If it's shared between hazmat and the city, is the maintenance shared as well?
Yes.
This is a dumb question, I know. What about insurance and liability on it?
It is under the hazmat insurance policy. All the vehicles in that upper building are covered under a hazmat policy.
And that actually renews on, I think, a December 1st renewal, December 1st or January 1st, where the rest of our city insurance is a March 15th. So it is completely separate, and we will have the hazmat fund before you at our next meeting.
This would be something if the city bought it, hazmat could lease it from the city in a way. Or contribute dollars towards that at whatever rate
Yeah.
it's
That's
used for
just-
hazmat purposes.
Do you think that would be likely?
It just have to be approached by both entities. I mean, I can't really speak until I get the supervisors all together and talk to them. luckily our quarterly meeting is just this Thursday, so. If there are any questions you want me to take to them, I absolutely would.
Is hazmat separate from the county or the city or anything? Are they a separate individual entity?
Yes. Yeah, the hazmat team, it covers an 11 county region. It is self-funded through those 11 counties. So yes, it's a separate fund. 150 is the code for the city and 155 is the code for our hazmat. So they're very much two separate accounts.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe that's all I have unless you have
Yeah,
any
I was gonna say, we've talked about the,
Just to confirm, so we're using code 150 for this right now? Or no?
so this, you'll actually see this later. These would both be coming out of Fund 310, which is the equipment purchasing fund. The plan is to run all vehicle bond proceeds through Fund 310. So it wouldn't be coming out of the hazmat fund and it wouldn't be coming out of the fire fund.
Okay. But then if the hazmat decide to pay half of it, then that will just reduce our cost of it, and
Yeah.
that will go into the hazmat.
Yep.
Or it will still go to.
And we have the budget worksheet for hazmat pretty much ready to go. Sarah will be attending that meeting on Thursday and talking about it. I can tell you, I can't give you a number off the top of my head, but they do have some fund balance in that fund. So it is not as though there is no cash sitting there. So, but as it's not a decision we can make for
Yeah,
them.
for sure.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then just the last project, I know the contract that was signed was for 870,000. I bumped this up to 900,000, knowing that with any new vehicle purchase, there are always things that you have to do to get it street ready with your logos and your different things. So there's some different funds in there as well to make sure that we can cover the full cost of getting that truck on hand and out on the street. Okay.
Yeah, for all your research, buddy.
You bet. Any other questions? Thank you.
Now Edward gets to take over. I didn't have any fancy pictures or anything, but he has 4 different requests to talk about.
All right. So, the first request I have for today is a replacement backup server. And basically, the replacement backup server and what'll be the third thing that I talk about, which is 2 replacement servers and the SANs go along with those, were originally purchased out of a CIP that the police department did when I started, and we had enough money in that CIP to basically utilize those citywide. So our existing backup server, it is running low on space. It's making the backup tasks a little harder to complete. It takes a little more work over the weekends to get that going. But it was purchased in September of 2018. And those generally have about a 5-year life on those. 5 years is about as long as you put a warranty on the server. It would also include some new backup software and some additional backup tapes, as we do keep quarterly backup tapes forever at this point in time, is our policy. Put a little bit of that in perspective. When I started, or at least when we started with our backup server in 18, our weekly backup was about 11.85 terabytes of data. Right now, we're running about 49.24 terabytes written.
So just a little bit more.
Just a little bit. And the unfortunate part is our data needs only seem to be going up exponentially. You know, it used to be a little bit more data each year, and that just compounds over the years. So that would be the first request for about 32.5. Anybody have any questions on that one?
Do we have any paperwork on any of the stuff you're talking about?
Those were the capital sheets that were submitted by the departments would have gone out in the packet.
Yeah, it's in
And they're in the same order that we're going through them on here too, so that should be okay.
MCG fiber request, that's the, what was that?
I'll talk about that here, unless anybody has any questions about that.
It's one of these, it looks like this.
No, I had a question on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get to the MCG fiber in just a minute. You find it?
Lots of stuff here, but I know, I'm not sure. Where'd you pull that out of?
The big pack,
It should be in your binder.
oh, you're right, I don't know.
Oh.
Do we want to start with fiber or keep us looking for these sheets?
Yeah, it would be pretty far
Yeah.
back there.
Allers.
Yeah. More, probably like 10 to 12 pages more.
Oh, yeah, here we almost.
Are you on IT?
I think so.
Okay.
IT, yes.
We got a bingo.
Good,
We got a
good turn
bingo.
there.
All right,
Alright.
hold your cards, proceed. Yes.
Okay, MCG fiber request. So a majority of our offices right now are interconnected with fixed wireless. So we have wireless equipment on buildings, rooftops, water tower, all kinds of places, up high and out in the wind and in the elements, lightning included.
Vandalism.
Yes, unfortunately vandalism as well. We've had the water tower vandalized twice now.
Twice.
Yeah. To where people have actually climbed the water tower and damaged our equipment up there.
Crazy.
Yeah, so, with MCG coming to town, they are willing to run dark fiber as they're building out. So that's unlit fiber that we light up with whatever kind of speeds that we need for that facility. Once they're established in the area, they do not offer dark fiber. We would have to do some kind of service through them and pay them for whatever speed we wanted. Can you explain a little bit about the difference in the columns there between
Yeah.
the 605 versus the 100?
Yeah, I think it is one of the pages that is in there, a backup page to your sheet. Edward had gotten basically estimates broken down for just about everything. Maybe I didn't print it, I just printed the sheet. And so in total, his estimate was $605,000 for a pay up front number, do it now. Well, when we look at what we would be trying to serve, there are some areas that we would serve, like sewer, that are not part of like the general fund. They're part of a proprietary fund. Landfill was another one where they would really bear their own costs in this. And not kind of the same way as, the police department or city hall. And so this $183,000 is basically the upfront cost for the non-business entity locations. And so that would have us paying up front. The business entity locations would still be part of the project. They would just choose to basically pay over time at a fee rather than paying it all up front like we would do with everything else. So the point that we tried to do here in thinking about this, we haven't talked about the general fund yet, but if you are paying something over time, that is going to come out of the general fund as an operating expense. If you are paying something in one large fee as a capital project, that is something we are using bond proceeds for. It's not going to hit our operating expenses, which helps us try and keep our general fund a little bit more in line. So that's kind of the difference between the two and treating things differently in kind of those business funds.
So out of those two figures up there, the $183,000 would be to interconnect all of our office buildings. So whether it's our two fire stations, our public works facility, our parks department, the police department, city hall, cemetery office. I believe airport is included in that one, isn't it?
I think airport was included.
Yeah, airport, our campground shower house, the beach Ottumwa, the Bridgeview Center, and then the depot here, as well as a fixed camera location, which is the Hoffman building. A lot of our police cameras are wirelessly connected back to that building.
And that's primarily just because it's a line of sight type of thing, tallest building shoots.
Yeah,
Police
yep,
department.
yep, so, the Schwartzes were nice enough, to grant us roof, access and roof space, for a lot of those, fixed wireless cameras. So,
How does that play out in the Joint Law Enforcement Center? The sheriff's department would pay their own costs for their fiber. This is just city, right?
this is just city.
Right.
So the remaining part that's over there, out of that, 605,000, like I said, 183,000 is just for the office buildings. The rest of that would be, sewer pump stations, and, I believe it's a recycling center that would be paying their own way. So as data needs increase, fixed wireless can only do so much. At the end of the day, we really need to look at a long-term solution, and this would be a 20-year contract with MCG to where we are paying a majority of the costs up front. So
And they provide the storage for the information that you,
they will provide the fiber between the locations.
okay, I understand a two-way street.
Mhm.
Who's paying for the street at one end or the other? We have to pay them to store information, or are they just providing us a vehicle for us to store it on something we have?
They're just providing the road for us to drive on.
Okay.
So,
So are we asking for bigger servers or more servers or?
that's what those other requests are, and it's not for bigger or more servers, it's really for replacement servers, to store more data. These facilities are currently interconnected. They have to be interconnected for internet access, for our voice over IP phone system to function, for Jessica to email reports, to these locations.
There's a lot of times, regardless of department, that we're working with really large files that email doesn't always like, and it's easiest just to drop it into the City Hall shared drive and then tell everybody, go out there and get that file, versus emailing it and taking up room on the servers.
And they do have connectivity now, and it is meeting our current needs, but we need to look towards the future here. And
Until we're gonna get more expensive.
yeah, and then also, downtime. I believe JD was out there at the airport, and we had some issues with the wireless link went out there, and we had fly at Ottumwa.
Right, because we go all the way to the water tower too.
Yeah, they actually go from, like, his office is in the terminal. Well, it goes from there to the hangar, from the hangar to the water tower, from the water tower to the high school, and then it actually does get onto some city leased fiber to get back to City Hall. And yes, we could purchase internet at each one of these locations and purchase firewalls and maintain those and maintain service agreements on all of that equipment. But at the end of the day, what option would you like? So
At the end of the day, it's cheaper to interconnect everything, isn't it? Not only is it cheaper to maintain, it would be cheaper keeping it maintained too, correct?
And it's more
Correct.
reliable.
and reliability, and just the speed. If we put JD on MediaCom out there and
You'll never have internet.
and he's gonna say, why does it take me 10 minutes to download this large file from City Hall? And,
Right.
So
I'm not objecting to what you're doing, I'm just trying to
yeah,
understand what you're
yeah.
doing. Okay.
So that's the fiber aspect. Any more questions on that one? And we do have a breakdown on what it costs per location, and it is all based on route miles. How many miles of fiber is that run? Because fiber doesn't install itself for free, and it doesn't maintain itself for free.
What's the time frame to get it installed? I mean, I don't know what's.
They would do it as they're building out their infrastructure, so some of those locations may not be online for 3 years. but I would imagine most of them will be before that.
So then in the meantime, we just use what we have.
Yeah, that brings up a confusing question. If we're paying that for, like you said, a 20-year contract?
It'd be a 20-year contract, but they'd start as locations are lit up. So there's a price breakdown for each location.
Oh, okay, so we wouldn't be paying for locations or not. You
Right,
see what I'm
right.
saying? That's what I'm
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So let's say Station 1 up here at Wapello and 4. They have the fiber there. It's ready to go. They're ready to hand it off. We're
paying for that.
We're paying for that one.
Gotcha.
And that fiber, as far as we're concerned, is not shared with anyone else?
No, those are dedicated,
Dedicated.
a dedicated strand of fiber to each location.
Okay.
Yeah. The next one on the list is replacement servers and basically SANs or the storage that go along with that. So our current production systems that pretty much everything is stored on, with the exception of our existing accounting system. That is a separate standalone system. Runs on some servers that were purchased back in 2016, and then the storage on those was upgraded in 2021. So those are definitely end of life, and we are starting to run low on disk space, even though that was all replaced in 2021. So what we're looking at is 2 replacement servers in the storage, and it'll also allow us to consolidate some of our other physical servers that we have that are separate, but we would basically, we're replacing these main 2, but then there's some other auxiliary servers that we would actually move the data over onto these as well. Any questions on that?
What we have, we will retain even if we're not using it as we are today. I just assume you can't pass those around because all that information is.
The drives, the hard drives will be removed and the server will be disposed of.
Okay.
Being from 2016, it's not worth the risk of data loss or.
Wagon wheels are getting rusty, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Most of these servers and storage devices we talk about have about a 5 to 7 year lifespan. 5 is typically when you'd replace them. 7, 8 years, probably want to put them out the door.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Edward on all 4 of the projects?
I've got one more.
Okay.
Just the tier 2 SAN. So what the tier 2 SAN is, and you'll notice a very large cost difference between, the replacing the 2 servers with the basically the tier 1 SAN to the tier 2 SAN is, tier 2 SAN is about another 100 terabytes of additional storage, but that's more for cold storage. So, we amass a lot of data in the city that we can't necessarily get rid of, or we don't have the personnel or time to go through and sort and figure out what we can get rid of. There's a lot of data that needs to be online and accessible by employees, but doesn't necessarily need the urgency and the fast access speeds. And granted, you might have 1 or 2 employees looking through that data, where you might have 50 employees concurrently accessing the tier 1 data. So that allows additional storage space to store some of that colder data.
It actually helps prioritize our data with tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah. Right now it's kind of all just intermixed on one. Well, actually, we technically have 2 sites, City Hall and the PD, where we store that data, and they are mirrored between each other. And this would do the same thing. They would be mirrored between those locations for disaster recovery and redundancy. But we put some of the older data on the tier 2 appliance, so it'd still be online, accessible by the employees. It just, it doesn't have the performance of the tier 1.
So Edward, 183,000 MCG fiber request.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other items that are listed up there? They're not part of the 183,000?
No, those are separate items, yeah.
So a total number would be what we're looking for.
605, is that 605?
Can you sum up those columns?
605 was the
Or wait a minute.
breakdown of.
It's total request for IT are $390,000. Okay, thank you, Edward. Next up, we have a $20,000 request from Jean for, court lighting in 2 different parks.
Yeah, the city electricians did an assessment of the tennis courts and the basketball courts in our parks, and found that the lighting was inadequate. About 60% of the lights were not working. And they're also 20-year-old metal halide 1500 bulbs. And what they want to do is replace those lights with LEDs, get them all working, and then we'll have lights on our tennis courts and basketball courts for the next few years to get a few more years out of those facilities. The other thing with LED lights is they're more efficient, so they won't be using as much electricity.
And none of these projects are part of the overall project for the new ball fields and all that kind of, these don't overlap any of that.
No, these are just repairs to existing facilities to make them playable at night with new lights.
Okay. And these facilities are in a different location.
Yes,
That's not part of.
Traeger Park across from Ridgeview, and then the basketball courts in Ottumwa Park.
So actually, with the cost of those lights, that extends our use of these areas too.
Yes.
It makes it safe for people, yeah. Makes it safe for the citizens to use.
And with the Traeger Park tennis courts, now that we have a hotel next door, they're probably gonna get more use, and we've also talked about converting to them to pickleball possibly.
That was my next question, pickleball courts, yeah.
And the Ottumwa Park basketball courts, where are they located?
They're located right next to the Dan Staggs tennis courts.
Stag.
Across from the old home.
Right by the softball fields there.
Okay.
So, long term, those may be replaced, but I mean, we're talking years down the road. As far as if you talk about the Ottumwa Park plan, that's where ball field would go in there, but that's gonna be probably the third or fourth set.
Right.
As far as prioritizing when the courts will go in. So I mean, you've got 10, 15, 20 years probably before, unless someone donates a ton of money to us.
You got any names? You good?
No, I'm just saying, if they did.
So the request for 20,000 is really pretty small when you talk about what you're talking about here.
It really is.
And the savings with the LED would probably, over a period of time, help to offset.
Yes, and the city electricians would do the work, and they're also good at finding rebates and other cost savings.
So we're getting a lot of bang for our buck.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Okay, moving on, next is Police Department, who has 5 different projects that we split over 2 slides here, and Chief is here to talk about that.
Okay, the first one is the the 5 access PTZ cameras. Those are the cameras downtown as part of our milestone program that is stemmed from the downtown camera project that the council way back when approved. We're having a lot of criminal activity in the downtown area, everything from burglaries to assaults, domestics, and since then, thanks to people like Edward, we've been able to expand the downtown and milestone camera to major intersections. To date, the program or this software system has solved everything from a simple criminal mischief up to the Cinemax homicide was critical in those type of cases. So we're asking for 5 new cameras. Over about half of those PTZ fleets are past their warranty. You never know when, but right now we're experiencing roughly 3 to 4 cameras that are going down each year. Of course, like Ed said, you have a 3-year warranty on them, and at year 3 and 1 week, the camera goes down. So these new cameras will have a 5-year warranty. And then coupled with that, the 2 new access points, that's how those cameras are going to communicate the information. These new generation of access points allow more information faster. in it, so it's kind of a combined package here of what we're asking for.
And I see you're asking for monies for 3 drones. Now we use those in place of the 1 unit we used to have. We could move around from one building to another.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
time.
no, the drones will be totally separate. These are just the stationary cameras we have around town for monitoring.
Well, the one time we did have a camera we
did.
could move around
We did.
if we could be fast enough and know where we wanted to put it.
Right.
So.
Right, absolutely. Anybody have questions on the, okay, sounds good. Next is the 3 drones that, Councilman Cavanis mentioned. So if you look at the middle there, those pictures, back in May of 2023, that set of 4 pictures, we were dispatched to the, 300 block of South Iowa Avenue for shots fired. We also had a female that was running northbound across railroad tracks. What had happened was it was a kind of a domestic situation there at the Juana's mini storage. Individual had a sawed-off .22 rifle. He put about 3 to 4 rounds at her as she was trying to run away. The picture that doesn't do it justice here, but that low right picture is actually a picture of a suspect where he had tried to do a, obviously, homicide-suicide, shot himself through the face through and through, but that picture and how close it is, that's actually a drone that we utilized. It was one of our officers' personal drones, and back in my day, that next picture is the emergency response team moving up to that subject in the vehicle. My day, you would just have to go up there and look in the window. So that drone is there. It allowed us to get eyes on him in real time. He had no idea that the drone was there, and that drone stayed in that position until those officers were able to move up alongside the door of the car, and then we were finally able to wake him up. We were calling his phone, we were using PAs, we were setting off sirens, but he was not coming to. But lucky for us, he had his eyes closed, we were all set up and ready to go. So we're asking for 3 for everything from patrol operations to search and rescue, and then tactical operations. One of the drones is any weather. It could be sleet, a thunderstorm, heavy winds, and it's going to do what we need it to do. It'll have a thermal camera, night vision camera, even has a loudspeaker, a spotlight. The second drone, a little bit smaller drone, and it'll be patrol based and deployable. So a faster drone, still capable, but there's times where we have individuals, children walk away, we have people run, ditch cars, take off on us, and that drone will be much faster to deploy because it's a smaller device. The third drone is a drone that's even smaller yet, but it'll be utilized more in tactical operations for like barricaded gunmen's. It's got some interior like avoidance system on it, so it doesn't bounce off the walls and all that good stuff. So it's that in a nutshell, if anybody has any questions.
Sounds like a bargain to me.
Mm-hmm. Does this include like the training and I'm guessing you have to be like licensed, not licensed, but
Yep. Our drone
whatever
team,
the word
yep,
is. Okay,
it's
licensed.
107, flight licensing you have to get. Our drone team that we've selected, they've all gone through it now and they're good to go.
Okay, so that doesn't, there's no like training or anything
Nope.
additional cost?
Nope. We're good to go as soon as we pull them out of the box.
You scared me. Oh, nice.
And we have, EMA has one, Tim Richmond has a drone that he makes available to people. Within the last 5 years, one of the most critical incidents we've had was the officer-involved shooting over at Liberty School. Mr. Richmond had that drone with him and was out of town. So we ended up having to utilize, just like this one, the drone was unavailable to us, so we had to use officers' personal drones on both occasions. So I think it would behoove us to have it as a city. And then, of course, engineering, IT, outside of search and rescue and tactical operations, if there was a need to fly it for whatever reason, it'd be available to other city staff also.
Also, they were talking about trying to find leaks over at the Ridgeview Center. A thermal drone can be used to find roof leaks if you do it fly it at the right time. So it's not just
There you go.
police, you can use it to find roof leaks.
That's what you have?
I don't have a thermal drone. It's just-
Drones could
I-
do a
I know a
bit
lot
fire
about
too, a little bit, correct?
All right, Chad, buy it. Let's go.
Yeah, let's get on it.
The fire department can be used to find the hot spots in fire incidents. There's a lot of use that could happen out of that M30T. M30T.
Yeah, we're pretty excited for if we can get it. Anybody had anything on the drones? Okay. The last one is the 6 turning targets by MotoShot. Currently, the police do all of our qualifications, YLE standards, low light quals, and combat shoots with firearms out at our open air range. That's out at the airport. Our target turning system is pretty antiquated and it's failed us and is no longer working. The Department of Justice and your trainers now are law enforcement's coming under scrutiny. Like, you know, for years we stand in front of a target, it faces us, we shoot a prescribed number of rounds statically, it turns, and then we get a score. So we're kind of coming under fire that we need to train more like we fight, where the officers are moving, the targets are moving. These type of target systems will allow us to have that training. Not only will the targets be able to face and turn at will, they'll also be able to move laterally forward, backwards from the officers to make a more realistic scenario during our training. So that's why we're asking for the 6 MotoShot training targets.
And the guy that turns those right now wants to retire?
Well,
And move on.
It was a compressor, but it gave up the ghost.
Is that compressor by that building and it's that rusted out chain thing
Oh, yeah.
there?
Yeah.
That, like little track that goes
Yeah,
around?
it's gone. It's gone. And then lastly, the TASER 10 implementation. So TASER is no longer really, the device itself is called TASER, but the company changed their name to Axon. And right now, such as what I have on my belt is called the X26. We've held on to this, the X26 versus the X10, which is what you see up there. That is the 3rd iteration of the TASER since we've had ours. But unfortunately, because it's proprietary, TASER is now, Axon I should say, all the firmware updates, if one of these TASERs go down, they're not fixing them, they're not doing anything for us. So they have us over a barrel, and obviously less lethal devices such as the TASER device have saved us from having to use an actual firearm on somebody countless times, and it's a great tool for us when it works. But obviously we need to implement our fleet of new TASER 10s.
TASER 10s are safer for an officer to use, right? Because it's multiple shots.
Yeah.
It's not, you can
Absolutely.
hit again, or redeploy without any cartridge changing.
Yeah. The TASER I have, as soon as you pull the trigger, both barbs go out. They either connect or they don't. The TASER 10, 2 barbs will come out, and if you can see it, essentially the cartridge has 10 shots. So if one of those barbs misses, the officer can immediately apply up to 8 other shots until he or she gets that neuromuscular incapacitation and connection. So it is handy. And yes, it's no fun getting tased. I would much rather be tased than OC pepper sprayed again, because that's the stuff that keeps on giving for an hour later, but I can tell you a story about that I had at the academy one time.
The final thing, just vehicle replacements. I think that's kind of a standard request. All of the vehicle requests that came to you tonight through fire department and police department were reviewed and approved by fleet management. So we kind of had a little bit of a conversation about the fleet management role at the last council meeting, and so there has been then a separate oversight. It's not just a departmental recommendation, it's coming from our garage staff and other staff as well. So one more project to go through here. Philip.
Hold on 1 second, please.
Oh, yeah.
How many vehicles is this project, for $270,000, it's a 2-year project, How many vehicles will that provide?
2 for this current year, and I think it was 3
Is it 3, 4?
for
Replace
4.
four
Oh yeah,
cars.
4. Yeah, replace 4 cars for FY26.
Okay, good.
Is that loaded with everything?
Yeah, that includes, so
Equipment,
each sedan
radio.
right now, SUVs around 45,000, and then we will try to, cannibalize it and put what equipment we can into new cars. Otherwise, it's about 12,000 to fully equip it with the police equipment per car.
Okay.
Hey, I request a 10-minute break.
Yeah, I'm good, I'm done.
I think we got more to go.
Well, I was just gonna ask if, when we, with this being the last project for bonding, if we would wanna stop there and then for the next work session next Tuesday, have the 300 funds to kick that off, rather than going through those tonight. Whatever, just a suggestion, given the time.
I'm good with
Works
it.
for me.
Same.
I'm good.
That sounds good.
Then Philip gets to,
Sorry, Philip.
Philip gets to, do his one project here real quick,
Okay,
so.
pressure.
For one
You want me to move around in the front? No, no,
Yeah, that's right.
That's the way it is.
That's for forgiveness and getting going.
Alright, so this project, in the past, this picture is where the BNSF tracks cross the Canadian Pacific tracks, just at the end of Gateway Drive. And in past floods, we have built, or not we, the railroad has built an earthen berm across there for us to close the levee off. FEMA and the Corps of Engineers have re-rated the flood profile through town, and a earthen berm will no longer be an allowed closure at that location. So, if FEMA decides to do an accreditation study of our levees, they will say that the downtown levee does not exist, and everybody has to buy flood insurance that lives behind that levee, unless we build a permanent closure across it. So, talked to an engineering firm out of Kansas City who built about 10 or 15 of these for the city of Kansas City. It is not a cheap project, as you can see. It's probably an 18-month design process because of the railroad there. But we have to build a permanent engineered structure to close it off with, which will probably consist of a deep foundation with piles driven down to however deep the engineer tells they have to drive them. Some sort of concrete structure between the rails, and they have some weird requirements on how you can attach to the rails because the rails have to move when the trains go past them. And there'll probably be some sort of stop log structure that's built up from there. So
Will this project cut off the railroad from running any railroad?
no, it'll be a stop block. So the base structure will be there and it'll stay there all the time. And we'll store what we've done. We have another stop log structure we bought for the area around the hydro dam. The stop logs themselves will stay probably stored in 1010 Gateway Drive, which is right down the street, a half block away.
Right.
And when the floods come up and when BNSF stops running trains across there, we can go out there, we can build a flood wall up in a matter of hours, and it'll be there. And then once they can run trains again, we'll take it down and put it away. So it'll be the same functionality as an earthen berm. It's just that in order for FEMA to accredit our levees, we have to have a permanent engineered structure across those railroad tracks now.
I remember in '93 when they put that wall up down there, wasn't a wall, it was a berm.
Yep.
And my employees were begging me, don't make me swim out of here, don't make me swim out. Okay, you can walk.
So that's the reasoning and purpose.
And the train has no, like, responsibility in anything.
It's all on us. So if we want to build a levee across their property, they're not going to object to it. I talked to BNSF too, and they have a whole division that deals with stuff like this. So they'll let us build a levee across there, but we have to follow their rules, follow their specs, go to their review process, and it's, they're their own thing.
And it is expensive to work within the right way of the rail.
Yes, it's expensive to build, it's expensive to engineer. Engineering is complicated, but it's also the time it takes to do all the reviews with the railroad. Yes, they're very timely on their reviews, and they're also, you know, it takes a while and they're strict, extremely strict. So it's not like you can just take something off the shelf and give it to them and they can get it back the next week and go ahead and build it. It'll be, if we approve this now, it'll be at least 12 to 18 months before they even get approval to build it for the railroad, from what I've been told. So. They don't listen to the state of Iowa, they only listen to the.
So what was your point about people not being insurable if they were on one side of that or the other?
So I'm just saying, like, right now, as our standard practice, you cannot build an earthen berm where the inverts, where the bottom of that berm is below the 100-year flood elevation.
Right.
And now this is below the 100-year flood elevation, so unless FEMA has told us we have to build this in order for our levees to be accredited by FEMA. So, and if your levees aren't accredited by FEMA, when they do a remapping study, the levees aren't there. And it's everything behind the levee would be in the 100-year floodplain, which is not now.
You won't get any money from FEMA for damage either.
Probably not.
It's not certified.
Yeah. So we're in the process of recertifying or accrediting all of our levees, and this is one of the issues that FEMA brought up, was this location right here.
Okay. All right.
So I would say that wraps up kind of the proposed borrowing projects. And then for our meeting next Tuesday, we'll plan to put those 300 funds that you have in your packet as kind of the first items that we'll talk about and get through those, and leave some time on the agenda to just see if there's any additional questions on the borrowing. But if you do have any questions, please let Phil or myself know, and we will try and get anything answered before we meet again on the 30th.
Okay.
I do.
It's late, it's hot.
Wait, Jessica, I have a question. There were no airport projects?
Yeah.
The airport projects are in Fund 303.
Oh, 303.
Yeah, so you're looking at, that one should just be torn up and thrown away, the one that you have, because it's not current. So, yeah.
So if we're ready to stop for tonight, we need a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Yes.
Councilmember Basu? Yes. Councilmember Galloway? Yes. Councilmember Hoffman?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.